Yes, join our revolutionary robotics spy penguins in half an hour as we reveal the cheeky characters of these fascinating beasts. On BBC One now, Inside Barclays, banking on bonuses.
Tonight on Panorama, we go inside the bank where the bonus was king.
Some people have said to me that was almost like a cancer that spread across the city.
A bank where hundreds of millions were made from complex tax deals.
It was for tax planning, tax structuring, for international business mostly. Is that tax avoidance? It's tax avoidance, yes.
A great British institution whose reputation has been trashed.
It doesn't really matter what the scandal is, Barclays seems to have a finger in every one of those pies.
Tonight, Panorama reveals how shareholders were misled about one of the biggest investments in the bank's history.
Any discrepancy of that kind is serious because it raises questions in the minds of investors.
Barclays told the world that a Middle Eastern sheikh was investing more than £3 billion, but we discovered he never did.
It's important because if you're not getting it right, you may be committing a crime.
Tomorrow, the bank will announce how it intends to change. Tonight, we show you why it has to.
Y'all ready for this? Hey, y'all ready, fellas?
Barclays, Britain's second biggest bank. 1,600 branches and 15 million customers. It's the sponsor of the Premier League and these, London's Boris bikes.
Barclays isn't just the bank you know from your high street. That's all changed. Barclays is now a much bigger deal.
It's grown from a national retail bank to an international financial powerhouse.
Barclays has gone from being a high street bank with an investment bank attached to it to effectively an investment bank with a high street bank attached to it.
It was the high street operation, the money in millions of personal accounts, that helped the investment bank to grow.
Having a retail bank attached to you is a great way to make an investment bank bigger and protect an investment bank from risks that come with running an investment bank.
The plan worked. The high street bank, used by the likes of you and me, is now the junior partner. The riskier investment bank made 3 times as much profit as its UK retail and business arm. But in recent years, the Barclays dream has gone sour. It was the first bank to admit cheating interest rates to boost profits. The so-called LIBOR scandal forced out Bob Diamond, the high-profile chief exec.
Clearly there were mistakes. Clearly there was behavior that was reprehensible.
And his replacement, Anthony Jenkins, has not had a great couple of weeks. He's promising a fresh start at Barclays.
I believe we have been too short-term focused, on occasions too aggressive, and on occasions too self-serving.
But 2 of his senior management team announced they were leaving. And after criticism of a potential £1 million bonus, Mr. Jenkins gave it up. Barclays have told us their commitment to change is genuine. And this corporate video shows senior execs chewing the fat on Barclays' new values.
I think it's about, can I justify to colleagues, friends, family, what I've done today? Do they understand it? Am I improving their lives? And can I be proud of it? Am I personally accountable for that? It makes you feel good as well.
But there are much more serious threats on the horizon. 4 investigations into how the investment bank did business. 5 if you include an internal Barclays review. So what's gone on inside Barclays? Well, we've been through thousands of pages of documents and spoken to insiders to try and build a picture of the way the bank worked. It's a place where incredibly complex deals help the Barclays bonuses keep coming. One man had more influence on the shape of Barclays today than any other. the former chief executive, Bob Diamond. He grew the investment bank into a money-making machine and then took over the whole Barclays operation. He was charismatic, charming and influential.
He is, or was, extremely successful and aggressive and dynamic investment banker.
In the city, he was admired for what he built. Whenever we questioned him as analysts, he was never strong on the detail of the numbers, but he had a clear plan in place and he knew how he wanted to deliver that.
I get up in the morning, I want a big breakfast. I want my girlfriend to say, "Good morning, big boy," to which I'll reply.
And Barclays wanted to grow. As this advert shows from 2000, the bank was brash, proud and up for the biggest deals.
I'll get into my big car, set off into the big wide world. She'll give me a big wave, close the door of our big house.
And it was prepared to pay big rewards.
There's only one small problem, my fee. I'd like it to be, what's the word?
Bob Diamond instilled Wall Street values into Barclays.
It was every man for himself.
But we sort of imagined banks to be a bit like that, don't we?
The best banks are not like that.
Those who were there in the early days as the investment bank grew say it was all about doing ever bigger deals.
You want to work at a profitable investment bank. If you don't, there's going to be problems, at the end of the year when it comes to bonus time.
So the bonus is king?
The bonus, particularly, yeah. At Barclays, if you brought home the bacon, so to speak, you could do anything.
But how did they bring home the cash? Barclays shifted the focus from high street banking to trading on the international financial markets, some of which has been criticised as casino banking.
The power inside that bank passed away from the old-fashioned bankers to the casino operators like Bob and his gang. Genuinely, there were quite a few profits, but some of the profits and the super profits were coming by taking in extreme risks.
Well, Barclays say many banks were involved in the aggressive pursuit of profit. They reject the term casino banking and point out that the investment bank has raised around £1 trillion for UK businesses.
Sometimes the most amazing things can escape your attention.
So Barclays, as this slightly disturbing American recruitment video shows, went hunting for the best people. But for Bob Diamond, they didn't come cheap.
I wouldn't know about it.
Basically, he got out his checkbook and he pioneered the idea of guaranteed bonuses. So it didn't matter how badly you did, you could just get your guaranteed bonus. And that became, well, some people have said to me that was almost like a cancer that spread across the city.
A company that is using their talents to become one of the fastest growing investment banks.
Investment banking is the same as the Premier League. The more you pay, the higher you finish up the league table in the Premier League. The same with investment banking.
Of course, private companies can pay what they like, and other investment banks pay their staff well too. But Barclays has been criticised for continuing to pay high bonuses even after the financial crisis in 2008. In 2011, Barclays paid nearly £2.6 billion in bonuses. But what about the people who actually own the bank, the shareholders?
So what does it feel like to be a shareholder of Barclays today?
Pretty grim.
Robert Muriel's been a Barclays shareholder for 30 years. But in recent years, his dividend, the payment on his shares, has been slashed. He's written to the bank dozens of times over the years.
And what did you tell the bank? What was your view?
Well, the view was that these payments were excessive. I realised the people were making money for the bank at the time, but I couldn't see any need for any one individual to get that sort of reward.
In fairness to Barclays, their record on dividend payments is better than some of their rivals. They say they are committed to rebalancing rewards between shareholders and staff. The overwhelming majority of shareholders support the pay structure. And those with shares in banks the government did bail out still do not receive any dividends at all.
Christmas, isn't it?
This recent ad suggests Barclays has moved with the times.
This is the shape of my banking.
Bonuses at Barclays have reduced significantly since 2008, but bonuses have far outweighed what the bank has paid to its owners, the shareholders.
I think that investment banking says it's for the shareholder, but actually is a machine for the enrichment of investment bankers.
Carol Williams is an academic who we asked to study Barclays' accounts. He says the investment bank dominates the business.
The firm has partly been captured by its investment banker workforce, and the commitment of resources to Barclays Investment Bank is much more in the interests of the senior investment bankers than it is in the interests of the shareholders or the public.
You can see why people might suggest that Barclays was being run for the benefit of its employees. Over the course of 2010 and 2011, Barclays paid its shareholders, the people who actually own the company, £1.4 billion. Over the same period, Barclays paid its staff £6 billion in bonuses.
There's absolutely no doubt that they were expensive shareholders. They were coming out of shareholders' pockets.
Martin Taylor was chief executive of Barclays until 1998. At the time, he questioned Barclays' expansion of its investment bank.
The value in the investment bank seemed to be going, even in the 1990s, to the people who worked in it. And the shareholders were underwriting the risk. That was what worried me. I don't think anybody in the investment banking industry deserves the amount of money they're being paid. I think the amount of money that is paid is utterly unjustified and has been for quite a long time.
Barclays says it pays less than many investment banks and that dramatically cutting pay would result in key staff leaving the business. So what about Bob? What was he on? Well, you might think a bank, more than most employers, would know how much they were handing over. So we asked Barclays to give us a figure for Bob Diamond's pay for the years he was a director. We asked lots of times. We asked for months. We got nowhere. Barclays told us that we were unable or unwilling to complete the simple task of compiling this information from the relevant public documents. They told us to look in 36 different places in their annual reports. They said the answer is in there. We did look, and so did our experts.
It would take you hours and hours, if not weeks, to actually get to the bottom of all this. You need a team of people working on this for several days. But if you actually look, you can see it's all over the place. You have to look there, there, and there. It's sort of on 4 or 5 pages.
Our best estimate is that in 6 years, Bob took home about £120 million in cash and shares. Barclays says a single figure for Bob's pay is a potentially very misleading and oversimplified approach. So where's the money coming from to fund the 7-figure bonuses? Well, Panorama has gone inside a controversial department that flourished in Bob Diamond's investment bank. Barclays doesn't like talking about it, but it's called Structured Capital Markets, or SCM. Given its size, what SCM did was amazing. It only employed 100 people, but managed to make around £1 billion a year in profit. Now, 140,000 people work for Barclays, but this tiny team was generating a significant chunk of the bank's total profits. So how on earth did they do it?
So Structured Capital Markets, SCM, was that there when you were at the bank?
Yes, it was. There was a business within the investment bank, relatively modest scale, very profitable.
What was it for?
It was for tax planning, tax structuring, for international business mostly.
Is that tax avoidance?
It's tax avoidance, yes.
Tax avoidance isn't illegal, and all banks work to lower taxes for their clients. but tax avoidance at Barclays was done on a spectacular scale.
It was enormous. It was enormous. I mean, it was a very major, tax avoidance was a very major profit centre for the whole of Barclays. It's as if their office in Canary Wharf was a sort of offshore island completely divorced from the rest of Britain.
I had a good look at what SCM was doing in my day. The question really was how aggressively it should be grown. My view was it should not be grown very aggressively, because you could only grow it aggressively by pushing the envelope too far.
Now, critics would say that Martin Taylor always opposed a major expansion of the investment bank. It was the main reason he left. And after he went, the SCM department did expand dramatically.
This company.
We've been given confidential documents which show the shape of one SCM tax avoidance scheme.
Barclays sits there. That's the Luxembourg Bank, that's the finance.
Staff lent billions of pounds to a bank in Luxembourg via complex structures and a company in the Cayman Islands.
Down at the bottom here, we've still got our £2.5 billion.
Barclays drew up the whole structure.
It's like some sort of nightmare IKEA map.
Somehow, all of this helped Barclays exploit the system and avoid millions in tax.
There's something else here which has got 120 million in dividend. And there's Barclays up at the top.
Barclays told us it does not offer, condone or support unlawful tax evasion. Where any SCM transaction has UK tax implications, we make full and explicit disclosure to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Inside Barclays Investment Bank, SCM was a closed world, but we've tracked down an insider. As long as we protected his identity, he agreed to tell us about this little-known tax avoidance department.
It was isolated. The whole section had about 100 people, including support staff, so there were about 60 people on the front end. They made huge profits.
Much of their work was about finding new ways of avoiding tax.
Some very smart people in the product development team would come up with a tax trick, and the marketing team would cloak it in some kind of rationale. Some tax structuring is common in a lot of banks, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly normal. The issue was that they turned it into an industry within the bank. We used to say to ourselves at the time, how does a bank get away with this stuff?
SCM paid some of Barclays' biggest bonuses. We've been told the bonus pool was 10% of profits, which would mean in its best year, 100 people shared £100 million. Barclays says our figures are inaccurate. But over the weekend, Barclays announced SCM will close. The bank is expected to say it will no longer engage in activities where the main objective is to access tax benefits. Which brings us to the biggest deal of all. Back in 2008, Barclays was in trouble. It looked like they might have to ask for a government bailout.
In 2008, the whole world banking system was in crisis, and the British banks in particular were in terrible trouble. Barclays, perfectly reasonably, were desperate to avoid a rescue.
So why was Barclays keen to stay out of government control when other banks were bailed out? Well, Barclays has made much of the fact that it remained independent, but some say there's another reason, the same old reason: bonuses.
They were prepared to do anything to avoid going to the taxpayer, because that would have required limits on bonuses. It would have undermined the culture that Bob Diamond was known for.
Do you think bonuses were a factor in this?
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. But I don't believe it was the only reason.
But it was a factor?
It must have been.
Barclays deny bonuses were a factor. They had been told, like all banks, to increase the amount of their reserves. By October 2008, they found themselves with just a couple of weeks to find the cash. We've been told they went to some surprising places to try and get it. Like Libya. This was when Colonel Gaddafi was still in charge. We've been told Barclays asked the Libyan Investment Authority if it wanted to buy a slice of the bank. One of the men who ran the Libyan fund told Panorama that they turned Barclays down because the deal was too rushed and too risky. Barclays say this is inaccurate, that they had no need for funding from Libya. In the end, it didn't matter. Two other groups in the Middle East were happy to provide the cash. £7 billion, mainly from the Gulf states of Qatar and Abu Dhabi. It came at almost credit card rates of up to 14%. The Qatar deal is under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office and the Financial Services Authority. But we think the Abu Dhabi side of the deal raises questions too, about Barclays' relationship with a Middle Eastern sheikh. You might not have heard of the man named as the main Abu Dhabi investor, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. But you will have heard of his other big British investment, Manchester City. Sheikh Mansour fronted a takeover of Man City a few months before he turned his attention to Barclays. Here he is meeting the players, but he's kept a very low profile in the UK. So I want you to tell me what you know about Sheikh Mansour.
They own City?
Just that he's a good supporter of City, that's all we know, really.
I just know that he's a very wealthy person and he's doing a fabulous job here.
Don't know too much about his investment in this country, other than the stuff he did with, was it Barclays Bank, where he helped bail them out, rather than them having to go to the government. So I know that he made a bit more cash on that one.
Sheikh Mansour is a member of the ruling family in Abu Dhabi. Back in 2008, Barclays told the world the sheikh was giving it more than £3 billion. Shareholders were told the same thing and voted to accept the deal. But Panorama has noticed something odd. It was buried deep in paperwork that was issued the day after the shareholders gave their approval. So, on page 44 of this prospectus, it says that Sheikh Mansour has arranged for his investment to be funded by an Abu Dhabi government investment vehicle, which seems like the Abu Dhabi government was providing the cash and not Sheikh Mansour. And that's important because although Sheikh Mansour is a member of the ruling family, there's a difference between his money and the government's.
Are they the same? No, they're not. It's sloppy thinking, this. There's a big difference between them. A member of a ruling family in the Emirates has his own personal life, wealth, activities.
And when we started delving deeper, we found more contradictions in the Barclays paperwork. Barclays filings to the US government suggest the Abu Dhabi government is the investor, not Sheikh Mansour. But Barclays' annual report, the document it sends to shareholders, talks about Sheikh Mansour in 2 separate years. And the problem for Barclays is they both can't be right.
Two reports referring to the same date, you'd expect to be entirely consistent, because if they're not, that means that there's something wrong, something inaccurate. Every bank is well aware that the annual report is a critical document, and a huge amount of time and attention is put into trying to get all the details correct.
Barclays has now told us the investor was actually the Abu Dhabi government. They've admitted they knew the investor might change, even as shareholders voted for Sheikh Mansour. The banks say that when the change was confirmed, it provided appropriate disclosure. Barclays admits it was wrong to still identify Sheikh Mansour in its annual reports, but says this was simply a drafting error. So Barclays misled the public and its shareholders over one of the biggest investments in its history. But that is not the only reason why our discovery might be important. Although Sheikh Mansour's money didn't save Barclays, he did play a crucial role in the deal. He was chairman of the Abu Dhabi investment vehicle that provided the funding. He's a government official. If it turns out Sheikh Mansour profited personally from the deal, it might look like a bribe.
You have to worry not because Sheikh Mansour may or may not be doing something wrong. You have to worry because you may be doing something wrong as a bank.
How big an issue is it to get that right?
It's important because if you're not getting it right, you may be committing a crime.
The Barclays deal offered a lucrative incentive, the chance to buy 758 million shares at a fixed price. Now, we don't know who benefited from these share options, technically called warrants, because Barclays issued them to an offshore company. We do know a few facts. That offshore company was controlled by Sheikh Mansour. It then transferred to the Abu Dhabi government, then an Abu Dhabi official, before eventually ending up back with Sheikh Mansour.
Because it's all offshore, it's impossible to prove whether the Sheikh benefited personally. But our evidence suggests that there are serious grounds to investigate whether he did.
I think red flags seem to have popped up all over the place. And every red flag has to be dealt with. You can't go on with those still unresolved.
And whose responsibility is it to get to the bottom of those issues?
It's Barclays.
We asked Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi government investment vehicle about the deal, but neither of them would speak to us. Barclays told us the allegations were not justified and that the change in ownership had no bearing on the transaction or required approvals. What we know for certain is that the Sheikh ended up as one of Barclays' biggest shareholders. The bank told us the deal was the correct decision for Barclays, its shareholders, its customers and its clients, as well as for the UK. They never turned to the British taxpayer. Senior executives did waive their bonuses the following year because of the deal, but the bonus culture inside the bank rolled on. Barclays says it's unfair to put this programme out the night before the new chief exec outlines his vision for the future. In a statement, Mr. Jenkins told us, "Unfortunately, I cannot change the past. No one should underestimate our total resolve to make Barclays a better bank." One of his predecessors says things have to change.
I think that trying to put the business on a more solid footing so that it doesn't make these missteps in the future is terrifically important.
But some critics think it's too little too late.
The fall of Barclays from being really the most reputable bank long ago, you lose a reputation that takes hundreds of years to build just in a few years, and it's going to take them a long time to rebuild it.
After so many years of relying on its troublesome investment bank, can Barclays finally end its addiction to bonuses?